Henry's abrupt statement left me wide-eyed and in disbelief. My sister and niece are moving in with us. You, a stranger, should go live in some cheap apartment, he asserted, his words hanging in the air, shocking me to the core. The fact that the house, owned by my in-laws, was actually in my name added another layer of astonishment. While I was open to transferring ownership to Henry, the reality of still paying the $3,600 mortgage hit me hard. After some contemplation, I mustered a smile and suggested I could move out, but then mentioned divorce, to which Henry responded with a smirk. Well, Dad's gone, and you're of no use to me anymore. His callousness caught me off guard, and his condescending tone only added insult to injury. Suppressing my emotions, I tried to stay composed as Henry laughed off my reaction, taunting me about being abandoned by my husband. Despite the turmoil inside me, I held back tears, realizing that Henry had no clue about the storm he had stirred. To distract myself, I began considering my next living arrangements. The idea of a $2 million luxury condo seemed appealing. As a 34-year-old married to Henry, who worked as an administrative staff member at a private girls' high school, I couldn't help but reflect on our situation. Henry's popularity among students and his nonchalant attitude towards their gifts often puzzled me, reminding me of my own high school crush on a teacher. Living with Henry's parents was comfortable, but the looming concern of my father-in-law's declining health weighed heavily on my mind. Despite my parents' absence, I cherished my in-laws and their kindness towards me. Henry's older sister, Kelly, and her family were a constant presence in our lives, especially her daughter Rachel, whom I had grown close to over the years. As an only child, Rachel adored me like a real sister, adding a sense of warmth to our family dynamics. I was thrilled that Rachel and I still kept in touch regularly, even though she no longer needed to stay with us. In contrast, my relationship with Kelly had never been smooth sailing. From the first time I met her parents, I didn't have a favorable impression of Kelly. Her initial remark to me was far from friendly. I thought you would choose someone cuter, she quipped, laughing. Disappointingly, Henry didn't defend me, and if his parents hadn't been upset with Kelly at that moment, I might not have married him. Henry later tried to make amends, stating, "I don't choose just by looks. What's inside matters to me for marriage." However, his words didn't resonate with me. I felt a stronger connection with his parents, who were quick to express anger on my behalf. It was then that I decided I wanted to repay my in-laws for their kindness, as I couldn't do so for my own parents. Recently, Kelly had been returning home often, and though she didn't talk to me about it directly, I'd overheard her discussions with Henry and his parents. Apparently, Kelly and her husband were constantly at odds, with her being nagged for not doing enough housework. In a snide comment, she glanced at me and said, "If I had a part-time job like Lisa, I could handle the housework too, but I work full-time." Kelly always seemed to compare herself to me, perhaps stemming from the time when her parents defended me during our first meeting. Her resentment had only grown because Henry sided with me. During a conversation about household chores, Henry and Kelly laughed at my expense, but when my mother-in-law shot me a cold gaze, Henry quickly changed the subject. He defended my efforts, mentioning how I had been taking care of his dad since his legs got bad. Feeling uneasy, I called Rachel, who calmly assured me that it was just her mom being unreasonable. According to Rachel, Kelly could do household chores when Rachel was at school, but for some reason, she chose not to. It appeared that Kelly wasn't being unfairly scolded, and Henry generally sided with her. While Kelly was competitive with me, Henry seemed to have his own rivalry with his brother-in-law, who worked at a prestigious company. However, in my opinion, Henry was clearly on the losing side financially, as his brother-in-law contributed significantly more to his family. The issue wasn't about earning less. It was about how much of their salary they spent on their family. Interestingly, Henry seemed unaware or unconcerned about how much money I earned from my part-time job. I simply wished that Henry would contribute enough to sustain a comfortable life within our means. It baffled me what he did with the rest of his salary, Sometimes he'd arrive home late, claiming to be out with colleagues. Whether that was true or not remained a mystery, but I trusted that Henry, who detested being the subject of student rumors, wouldn't cheat. At least, that's what I believed. Henry's usual $2,000 contribution to the household barely scratched the surface of our expenses. This alone could easily be a catalyst for constant arguments or even divorce. While we didn't need to pay rent for our family house, $2,000 felt insufficient. Why don't you ask your parents to pitch in for living expenses? Henry's inability to grasp my concerns was frustrating. I wasn't demanding him to shoulder the entire burden alone, but his responses and demeanor suggested a lack of accountability towards our family. You can say such things after you have kids, like Kelly, he added, knowing it would sting. That moment made me realize that my husband could care for his sister, but not his wife. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's deteriorating mobility worsened our living situation. Our home, nestled amidst slopes, wasn't wheelchair-friendly. I proposed relocating to my in-laws when Henry wasn't around. We could use the proceeds from selling the house to finance a new one, and I'd cover the remaining loan. My in-laws exchanged glances, hesitant at first. You shouldn't have to bear such costs. You're already contributing more to the living expenses than Henry, aren't you? My mother-in-law said apologetically. It's okay, I assured her, suggesting that using my inheritance from my parents would honor their memory. Despite my dwindling affection for Henry, I still cherished my in-laws and desired to stay with them. After discussing with Henry, we agreed to move to a new house, which we remodeled for accessibility, installing handrails for my father-in-law's comfort. The new house proved to be a sanctuary for him. Initially hesitant, my in-laws agreed to one condition: keeping the new house in my name without disclosing my inheritance to Henry. If Henry learns about your money, he'll rely on you even more. We can't allow that, my father-in-law remarked, aiming to shield me from Henry's dependency on my parents' inheritance. His concern touched me deeply, and I couldn't help but wish for better health so I wouldn't be such a burden on him. My father-in-law's apology resonated with a profound sense of humility and love. I waved my hands dismissively, insisting it wasn't a burden at all. I genuinely looked forward to our daily walks, hoping they would contribute to my father-in-law's recovery. My words were met with a warm smile from him, which warmed my heart. Since my father-in-law couldn't walk much, he had lost his appetite and weight. I held on to the hope that the new environment would aid in his recovery. I truly wished for his health to improve, from the depths of my heart. During one of Kelly's visits, she marveled at the beauty of the house, freely exploring every corner. She expressed dissatisfaction with the handrails, claiming they ruined the aesthetic. I firmly stated that my father-in-law's safety was paramount, to which Kelly merely snorted in response, saying nothing further. In our efforts to accommodate my father-in-law's needs, we always kept the toilet seat up for his convenience. Despite explaining this to Kelly, she continued to close it, disregarding the difficulty it posed for him. One day, we heard a loud crash from the bathroom. Rushing to the scene, we found my father-in-law on the floor, having fallen while attempting to open the seat. Sternly, I reprimanded Kelly for her negligence, unable to forgive her this time, even though she was my sister-in-law. Thankfully, my father-in-law wasn't seriously injured, but the incident highlighted the importance of his safety. My usually calm mother-in-law was incensed, demanding Kelly leave immediately to restore peace in our home. However, our relief was short-lived as we soon received devastating news. My father-in-law had cancer, already spreading throughout his body by the time of diagnosis. Despite our efforts, there was little we could do, and he passed away just 6 months later, leaving us grieving and shattered after the funeral. I overheard a conversation from the living room that sent a shockwave through me. Now that Dad's gone, this house will be yours, right? Henry speculated, his tone laced with uncertainty. My mother-in-law's face tensed up, echoing the weight of the moment. Maybe it's left to Mom, she responded, her voice betraying a mix of emotions. It's good he didn't suffer long. Caring for him would have been hard, right? Henry added, His words met with a nod of agreement. "Well, yeah, but we have a handy housekeeper here," he remarked, his tone bordering on callousness. An urge to protect my mother-in-law surged within me, and I quickly grabbed her wrist, silently urging her not to reveal her anger by opening the living room door. "Maybe Rachel and I should move in too," Kelly said cheerfully, her words cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. My anger flared, fueled by the sudden realization of Henry's insensitivity. During preparations for the funeral, I stumbled upon receipts from questionable establishments while sorting through his suits. The thought of him squandering money on such indulgences infuriated me, especially considering the sacrifices we made. By then, I had already contemplated ways to confront Henry about his behavior. However, his abrupt announcement days after the funeral blindsided me. "My sister and niece are moving in. You, a stranger, can go live in some cheap apartment," he declared, his words landing like a heavy blow. Shocked and unable to process his words, I felt the weight of his dismissal. Unaware that the house was in my name, Henry's callousness only fueled my determination. Despite my initial plans to confront him, another option dawned on me. With a forced smile, I stated, "I'll move out, but then I want a divorce." The gravity of my decision hung in the air, but Henry, oblivious to my inner turmoil, simply grinned back with a dismissive tone. "Well, now that Dad's gone, you're of no use to me," he retorted, his words dripping with disdain. His casual disregard for my feelings stung, as did his subsequent dismissal of any property division. My face fell, and I couldn't help but cover my mouth, my silent acquiescence signaling the beginning of a painful realization. I responded with trepidation, my voice trembling as Henry laughed loudly in response. "Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband," he taunted, and I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my laughter. Inwardly, I marveled at how oblivious he was to what lay ahead. To distract myself from the absurdity of the situation, I contemplated where to live next. The perfect place came to mind: the $2 million luxury condo left to me by my parents. Among the properties they left, this condo, their dream home, stood out. Although I hadn't been keen on it before, the idea of living in the last home my parents stayed in now appealed to me. However, a concern lingered. If I moved there, I would end up living with my mother-in-law and Rachel. Desperate to find a way to rescue them from such a living arrangement after divorcing Henry, I hatched a plan. I decided to move to a facility, announcing it to Henry and Kelly when sharing my decision to leave. To my surprise, Kelly announced her return to live in the house. Struggling with the absurdity of her statement, I wondered about the daughter who had previously expressed relief at her father's passing. An idea struck me, and I whispered to my mother-in-law about getting kicked out if they refused to let me leave. As a condition for the pending divorce, I ended up staying in the house temporarily, sharing a room with my mother-in-law until I found a new place. Our plan unfolded when Kelly and Rachel moved in. During dinner, my mother-in-law casually stated, "Hey, there's no dinner for Dad." The room fell silent as Henry and Kelly froze in shock. "What are you talking about? Dad passed away," Henry exclaimed. My mother-in-law maintained the charade, speaking to the empty chair where my father-in-law used to sit. "Apologize to Dad. It's bad luck to talk like that, right, Dad?" she continued, addressing the empty chair and preparing a meal for him. To further punish Kelly and Henry, who had laughed at my late father-in-law, my mother-in-law insisted on keeping the toilet lid closed, claiming it would trouble him. Kelly reacted angrily, grabbing her hand and confronting the portrait of his father. My mother-in-law calmly reiterated that he was right there. As Kelly yelled about the altar, my mother-in-law sat opposite it, maintaining the facade that her husband was still present. "The altar and beyond, all your horrible words and actions, Dad is watching, always," my mother-in-law said in a calm, cold voice, sending shivers down Kelly's spine. "Stop it," Kelly cried, horrified, fleeing the room as expected. "Mom's gone senile, but the doctor says there's nothing wrong with her," Henry lamented, his frustration palpable. Yes, she acts completely normal in public and in front of the neighbors. It's driving me crazy, Kelly agreed, her concern masked by irritation. As I pretended not to listen while doing the dishes, their whispers floated from the living room. Finding a facility won't be easy, and it's expensive. Kelly, can you afford it? They discussed the mortgage and money, seemingly more concerned about finances than my mother-in-law. Their disregard for her saddened me deeply. Turning off the tap, I interrupted their conversation. I've found a new home. I can take Mom with me until we find a good facility, I announced. Surprised, they exchanged glances as I continued. And about the mortgage, I've been the one paying it. Henry mumbled to himself, calculating silently. If Mom and I leave, I'll transfer the ownership and mortgage payments to you, I assured Henry, feeling relieved to protect my mother-in-law. However, a new problem emerged. Rachel approached me with a serious look, suspecting Kelly's affair. She had seen Kelly with another man while Rachel was at school. Assuring Rachel, I hired a private investigator to look into Kelly's infidelity. The evidence confirmed her affair, leading to divorce proceedings initiated by her husband. Relieved, my mother-in-law and I left the family home and moved into the $2 million condo. One peaceful evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Henry and Kelly stood outside. What do you want? I asked, feigning ignorance. You're not answering your phone, Henry retorted angrily. Driving to a nearby cafe, their real concern surfaced. The mortgage of the family home. Why is it so high? $3,600 a month. Henry fumed, barely containing his frustration. Sipping my coffee calmly, I smiled. That's the value of living in such a house, isn't it? Their desperation for answers only reinforced my decision. No sign of gratitude for all the months I'd contributed to the household expenses. I couldn't help but feel the weight of their unfairness. I've been paying that amount, and you never asked. You pretty much left the whole name change process to me, didn't you? I hinted at their neglect, but deep down, I understood the circumstances. Kelly was facing demands for child support from Rachel's father, and she had also quit her job after her affair became known at work. As far as I was concerned, it was all self-inflicted. Turning to Kelly with a smile, I acknowledged the tough situation. What do you mean? Henry doesn't contribute much to the house, Kelly questioned, eyeing Henry. His mumbled response didn't fool her, but she hadn't caught on fully yet. Henry's warning in a low voice prompted me to reveal the truth. He only put in $2,000 and spent the rest at places like these, I said, laying out dubious receipts on the table. Kelly's expression turned from shock to disgust as she read the names of the establishments aloud. What is this? You've been going to these kinds of places. Her outrage hit a nerve with Henry, igniting a heated argument between them. As they exchanged accusations, I quietly observed, sipping my coffee. Realizing that a complaint from the cafe might be imminent, I intervened, apologizing to Henry and diverting the conversation. With a sense of alertness, Henry probed further, but my subtle hints didn't register immediately. When I pointed out the familiar uniforms of school students at the cafe, Henry's realization dawned with a loud noise. The embarrassment was evident as Henry stood, trembling. His defeat was palpable as I reminded him of the repercussions at school the next day. Eventually, the family home was put up for sale, and Henry and Kelly moved to a small, old apartment. Henry resigned from the girls' school amid complaints about inappropriate staff members, which only fueled the rumors further. As the truth unraveled, Henry and Kelly came begging for help, relying on my inheritance and my mother-in-law's pension. However, I sent them away without needing apologies. Now, I live with my mother-in-law, and Rachel often visits our condo. We cherish our time together, gazing out at the vast sky, hoping to fulfill the filial piety I couldn't show to my parents.